Good morning. We're going to continue our discussion on lab result interpretation today after the handbells. Love the handbells. Really, really love the handbells. Teresa, thanks for doing that. Makes my morning. Makes me smile. Okay, so yes, we had a whopping 12 books that we were able to put up on our site yesterday, and they're gone, but we have more on order. Maybe there. No, I think that was the last one this morning. So we have more on order. I have no idea why Amazon is still has them marked as out of stock. Hugh is going to investigate that today. Somebody sent me a message yesterday and said, "Why don't you send more books to Amazon?" I don't send the books to Amazon. I have no control over that. We basically we are publishing through Ingram Sparks, and then Amazon gets the files from Ingram Sparks and prints the books. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to have Hugh check and make sure there's not a glitch in the system there somewhere because we do want these books out there and available for people. So, yesterday, let's see, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, we talked about liver function testing, and then yesterday we were talking about kidney function testing, urinalysis, that sort of thing. So today I thought we would move on to the CBC, which is the complete blood count. So generally, when you have a blood panel done, you will get a CBC, which is a complete blood count. So that's the white cells and red cells and platelets. You'll get a chemistry screen. So the chem screen is what we've been talking about with liver and kidney function. There's some other tests that we haven't gotten to yet. And then your lab results may include a urinalysis, may include thyroid screening, or some other specialty tests. So the CBC stands for complete blood count. So the three main things that you're going to get on there are a white blood cell count, so that's the WBC, a red blood cell count, the RBC, and the platelets, which is usually abbreviated PLT. So a normal platelet count is between about 150,000 and 300,000. So let me find it on here. So this one, it says platelets 872K. So the K stands for 1,000. Now, 872,000 is extremely high. When I see platelets that are in the 7, 8, 900,000 range, then I'm very concerned that there may be a bone marrow cancer or myelopathy going on, or something highly inflammatory that's causing that problem. So when you have a platelet count that is consistently very, very high, I'm going to be looking for some big time inflammation or cancer going on. If the platelet count comes back low, there's a couple things that could be going on. If you happen to own a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel or English Toy Spaniel, low platelets are very common in the breed, and it's normal for the breed. And they're usually seen, and it'll have notes on there that say giant platelets. So the first few times I saw this, when I originally had Cavaliers, I kind of freaked out and said, oh my gosh, we need clotting tests. We need to see what's going on. But it really is a fairly normal condition for this breed of dogs. It's not a problem. They're not going to bleed to death. That's just a genetic thing that they have. I think about half of our dogs have the giant platelets. So their platelet count will run 50,000 to 70,000, and that's perfectly normal for them. For a pet who generally has had a normal platelet count around, the 150 to 300,000 range, and suddenly you get something back that is less than 50,000, less than 30,000, we better be looking for a clotting or bleeding disorder somewhere in the body. Those platelets are getting used up, or they're not being produced. There's something going on. So we'll see that in pets who are having autoimmune disease where the body is killing off the platelets. And very commonly, if the platelet count gets low enough, we'll see some bloody nose, we'll see bleeding in the bowel, we'll see bruising or little pinpoint red spots that are actually hemorrhages on the skin. So platelet count can be pretty darned important. Now, unfortunately, if your technician or veterinarian does not put enough blood in the blood tube, it's usually in a little lavender top tube. If they don't put enough blood in that tube, you can get a falsely low platelet count. And the reason it's a false low is because they didn't put enough blood in there, and so they were too diluted out by the anticoagulant that keeps the blood from clotting. The other thing that can happen is they take too long to get the blood draw. The blood starts to clot in the syringe so that when they put it in the tube, it's already got some clots in it, and it used up some of the platelets. So the platelet count can be false low with that as well. The lab will usually say, it'll usually say on the lab results, quantity in tube very small, may be false reading, or it might say that clots were seen in the sample, might be false readings. If you're seeing that, then you need to go back and get another blood sample and get a good one. I saw this recently on someone who uses a house call veterinarian, and the veterinarian did not get enough blood. So there was very, very small amount of blood in the purple top tube, and so the dog's white cell count was extremely low, the red cell count was extremely low, the platelet count was extremely low. Because it was low across the board, and because the lab put on there very small quantity in the tube, it was easy for me to say to the client, you need to get another blood draw. I think this is a bad draw and a bad reading. And when that's the case, the veterinarian should repeat that particular test for no charge because it was their mistake for not getting enough blood in the tube. So that's what we do in our office. If we make the mistake, then we're responsible for fixing it. Okay, so that's platelets. So the other two main things are the red cell count and the white cell count. So the red cell count should be normally around 5 to 8 million, somewhere roughly in that range. So that'll come out like this one says 5.00 M. So the M is the million. So 5 million. And things that are associated with that are going to be the HCT, which is the hematocrit. And the hematocrit, they take a small sample of the blood and they put it in a real skinny little tube called a hematocrit tube, spin it down in the centrifuge, and it separates the cells from the serum. And then we look at what we call the hematocrit, but it's basically the percentage of the serum, percentage of the blood sample that is actually red blood cells. So this one was 33.3%, normal is 38 to 56. So this dog is anemic. Hematocrit's very simple to run. That one's easy to run in the office. We do those quickly in the office a lot. The other thing that you'll see along with that is going to be hemoglobin. So you can have a normal red blood cell count but a low hemoglobin if a pet has deficiency in iron in their diet. So the hemoglobin is, that's the molecule that carries the oxygen, so very important when we have pets that might be struggling to get enough oxygen with respiratory disease or heart disease. There's also three other numbers on here, MCH, MCHC, and MCV. Those basically tell us the size and maturity, sort of the red blood cells. They're not used as often. They are very specific. I only worry about those if I have a pet who's anemic, and then I can look at those, and that might tell me, are the red blood cells being kicked out of the bone marrow too early? Are they old, dying red blood cells? It gives more information about where the anemia might be coming from. And then the last thing that's associated with the red blood cell count is something called the retic count. Retic stands for reticulocyte. A reticulocyte is a baby red blood cell. And so we normally don't see a lot of those floating around in the bloodstream. They normally reside in the bone marrow. But in a pet that's very anemic, the bone marrow should start kicking out a lot of red blood cells, and so it'll start kicking those immature red blood cells out early to replenish the red cells that are missing in the bloodstream. So if you have an anemic pet, you'd actually like to see a really high reticulocyte count to show that the bone marrow is working. Now, if the bone marrow isn't kicking out those reticulocytes in an anemic pet, a couple of things may be happening. Could have chronic kidney failure, like we talked about yesterday, where the kidneys are not making the hormone anymore that tells the bone marrow to make the red blood cells. That's a kind of a big problem, because if we don't tell the bone marrow to make the red cells, it's not going to do it. There are synthetics of that hormone available. Unfortunately, a lot of pets will react to it, but it has also saved lives. The reticulocyte count could also be low with an anemic pet if they've been anemic for a long time and the bone marrow is exhausted. It can also be low if we have a bone marrow problem where the bone marrow just has stopped working for whatever reason. We see that with chemicals. We'll see that with some forms of cancers, bone marrow cancers. So that's what we're looking for with the reticulocytes. White blood cells, where's our normal range on here? Normal range for this lab is about 5,000 to 17,000. This dog came in at almost 11,000. So that's pretty normal range, but we also look at the distribution of the white blood cells. White blood cell count will be high with infection, or should be high with infection, inflammation, or cancer. It can be low if we have a viral infection. Viral infections will sometimes kill off white blood cells, so it'll actually drop. But we also look at the different kinds of red blood cell or white blood cells. And there's 5 different kinds. So eosinophils are allergy cells. So very commonly, if the eosinophils are high, it means something is making the body react. So first thing we look for is parasites. So external parasites, fleas, very commonly will cause high eosinophils and an allergic response. Intestinal parasites, roundworms, whipworms, hookworms, coccidia, giardia can cause a high eosinophil count. Or a dog or cat who just has a lot of environmental allergies. So I see a lot of cats that come in with miliary dermatitis, that bumpy, itchy skin disease, usually secondary to fleas, but it's definitely an allergic reaction, and their eosinophil counts will be through the roof. Lymphocytes, so those are made in the lymph nodes, and we will see high lymphocytes with lymphoma, sometimes, but not always. Lymphocytes are attacked by viruses, so if you have a viral infection, the lymphocytes will usually drop. Monocytes are called monos on here, and they will be high with chronic inflammation, not necessarily infection, but chronic inflammation. So it can be any kind of inflammation. And then there's neutrophils, and those are the white blood cells that clean up after infection. They're kind of the immune system, those in the lymphocytes. So the neutrophils, if they're high, they can be high with stress, inflammation, or infection. So how do we know whether it's infection? There's something called band cells. And when band cells are over 1,000, you have active infection. That's a bacterial infectious process. That's when you need antibiotics. So what I find is that pets are treated with antibiotics way too often. Way too often. We get a high white blood cell count and everybody freaks out and says, oh, we must have an infection somewhere, and they automatically get antibiotics. High white cell count only means infection if we have band cells over 1,000. If we don't have band cells, we might have inflammation, very different from infection. We might have cancer, very different from infection. So the lab results really need to be interpreted correctly. Just getting a high white cell count does not mean we throw them on antibiotics, does not mean they have an infection. Could be a lot of other things. So commonly I'll see these reports that come in where people say, well, he's been treated 5 times with antibiotics, white cell count's not going down, what's going on? And I look at it and go, well, you have a 70,000 white cell count, normal's 10,000, you better be looking for cancer, because the antibiotics are not going to solve that problem, and that's why they're not working. So that's a quick overview of a CBC. That's a ton of information. We could delve into each one of those by itself, but that's it for today. Except I lost my producer. He went to inform Shotzi that she should stop whining. Okay, I've got to get to the office. Hugh's going to slide us on out of here, I think. Everybody have a wonderful day. And this information, this is one of those things where you probably need to slow it down and take notes. Lots of questions. I'll try to get to them.